What is consciousness? It's an age-old tradition that consciousness is something which is very intriguing. It is very perplexing, and everybody is trying to really understand what constitutes consciousness. If you go back into the tradition of the ancient history, especially Greek history, it was Socrates and Plato and Aristotle has delved into it, and of course there are a lot of philosophers has talked on it. Recently, we have Daniel Dennett, Donald Hoffman, David Chalmers, Ned Block. These are some of the authorities and have spoken and written so much. And definitely, Western philosophy, Western psychology has a lot of contribution into the field of consciousness. And if you get into the Eastern perspective, we have Adi Shankaracharya and Sri Aurobindo. Abhinava Gupta has again commented and written so much, and there is always an aspect in terms of objectivity and subjectivity, and it is a riddle and it is very very perplexing, and research is still on, and the research is on from the perspective of psychology, from philosophy, from neuroscience, from our quantum physics, and people are trying to, even from AI, that is artificial intelligence and computing, and people are trying to delve more into the area of consciousness and really understand what exactly is consciousness. But definitely, if you Google it, this is one of the most cutting edge topic that people are actually getting into it. I got interested in consciousness for last few years, and I found that it is something which is very exciting, and why not to delve into it. And then I started reading a lot of books, both from the Western and in the Eastern perspective, and now my level of understanding, of course, has deepened. But definitely, there's a lot to research and a lot to really understand. So this particular series on consciousness, I'm creating to make more aware among people, among students and faculties, and even for general public, to really delve into it and really understand how and what and where consciousness is arising, and how it can really elevate our life in terms of chaitanya. That is actually the word in the Sanskrit. Now, let's understand some of the approaches of consciousness. And from the Eastern perspective, if you really get into, we generally, there are two margas. One is called Pravritti Marga, another is called the Nivritti Marga. Pravritti Marga is basically talking about where we are externally oriented, and where everything is happening in terms of the worldly processes. And Nivritti is something where we are trying to go within and trying to introspect. And both this perspective makes lots of sense, because consciousness, especially like David Chalmers talked about the hard problem of consciousness. How can matter, that is the brain, can emit consciousness? That is one particular perspective. There are other perspectives also we are going to really get into it. Now, if you see from the Western perspective, you will find that they are talking about mind with respect to mind as it is, intellect and consciousness. Mind, intellect and consciousness. In the Eastern perspective, we have manas, we have buddhi, and we have chaitanya. Buddhi is the intellect, and consciousness, of course, has a different orientation, and they're trying to go much of a nivritti marga rather than the pravritti marga, which is much for introspection rather than the externalities. Of course, again, if you really understand mind, because when you talk about consciousness, mind definitely comes into it, but definitely consciousness is beyond mind, and it is beyond body, it is beyond personality, it is cosmic. At the same time, it is also very much embedded in our empirical existence. So if you actually get into the mind, you divide mind. We have there are what consciousness has come, like we have unconscious, we have subconscious, we have superconscious, and of course we have conscious. So when you say conscious, conscious basically means that we are all awake and we are all operating, and it is our daily living processes. Subconscious is below the level of our conscious, and many memories and many thoughts and beliefs are stored there. and sometimes they operate and they come to the conscious level. Superconscious is something which is at a higher level, and they are at a level of witness level, where it is able to see the material world, it is able to see the energy world, because we have a lot of realities of existence. So one of the realities is the reality of the matter. Another reality is the reality of the mind, and another reality is something which is beyond matter and mind. And superconscious state is that particular state where it is able to go beyond matter and mind. We'll be delving more into my succeeding series of lectures on consciousness. And then, of course, there is an unconscious. Unconscious is something which is the deepest layer, where they are difficult to access, and maybe through certain meditational practices or certain kind of a techniques, you can actually access that. And maybe sometime it is being said that in dreams we get into our unconscious layer. But of course, there's a lot of interplay, and many of them are subjective dimension. So if you actually broadly classify the mind, there is a subjective phenomenon and there's an objective phenomenon. Objective phenomenon is trying to the externalities, and the subjective phenomenon is primarily is delving into the introspection. There are two more classification. We generally talk about an empirical dimension and the transcendental dimension, and there's a third dimension also I'm going to speak, called transcendent dimension, which is different from transcendental dimension. I think before I get into this three dimension, that is empirical, transcendental, and transcendent, let's understand some of the basics of the mind. From the Western perspective, it is being said that mind again has three parts. Other than this superconscious and subconscious and unconscious and generally conscious we're talking about, we have the cognitive part, we have cognitive part, and then affective part. Cognitive part is something where the mind is talking about processing, the way we process, the thinking, creativity, criticality. All these elements into get into cognition. Today, of course, a lot of importance is given to the cognition, and we do have, and it is being said that man is intelligent because of his cognition, and it is today cognitive revolution you're talking about, cognitive computing you're talking about. So a cognition, a better cognition will give you a better entry into a great job, because you're able to really crack those examination. You are much more creative, you are much more critical in your reviews, and people are actually looking for that. So it has a lot of importance into the job market, and definitely in your own life. And it is, of course, most sought after. Then we have cognitive. Cognitive is talking about your behavioral dimension, willingness, initiative, and again it has its own importance. It is not only cognition but about action. And then affective talks about our emotions, our warmth, our feelings. So these are some of the broad aspects that you can really understand. And of course, when you study consciousness, mind invariably comes in. And when you talk about mind, you are trying to really understand the states of mind in terms of subconscious, unconscious, superconscious, cognitive, cognitive, and affective. And then as I promised, let's get into something which is much more interesting, where you're talking about empirical and the transcendental and the transcendent. So when you talk about the empirical aspect, it is an aspect where we talk about the worldly processes, the objectivity, that we are conscious because of the world, and ultimately we are all having certain kind of a relationship with our world, and this is again a kind of a thinking. So we are conscious because of the worldly processes, because we are objective. That's something which I referred to something as a pravritti marga. That is one of the approach. So that is one. Transcendental is something where we are trying to go a bit beyond the empirical domain, and it is not only just in terms of embodiment of thinking in your body, but something which is more than that, transcendental, which is beyond matter, and we are able to really comprehend that. This aspect of transcendental domain is something which we are not very, very clear, and I think there is an aspect where a lot of research is actually going on, and maybe unconscious loosely can refer into. We are going to delve more into this, like subtle body, we have a gross body, we have a causal body. So maybe if you can talk about the causal body called Karana Sharir, that is something which is getting into the transcendental. Transcendental is something which is also doesn't have any locus. It doesn't have any ashraya, no locus. Neither it has a vishaya or a dravya. So try to understand. It doesn't have a locus, that is ashraya. Neither it has a vishaya or dravya, which is so it is beyond ashraya and a vishaya, and that makes it very, very interesting, and that makes it very, very fascinating. Transcendent domain is something where it is beyond even the transcendental. It is to do with God. It has to do with the afterlife. It has to do with the soul. And there actually we get into something that we are actually now going much more beyond the empirical domain and even to the transcendental domain. So ultimately, consciousness is a subject matter of study. It's a subject matter of research, and we are going to deal more in my next series of lecture on consciousness much more, where we have stopped and we're going to take more. Thank you.